Welcome to the Next Level Casino Careers Show, a series highlighting industry tips and insights from the best minds in the casino and hospitality industry. Enjoy the show.
Dr. Bryan K Williams. I'm so thrilled to have you on the show, man. Thanks for joining us here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Kyle. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me.
So, your insight and just having you here on the show, I'm so excited. You're a keynote speaker, you're an author, you're a consultant. You've been around the globe. You've helped across 20 different verticals or 20 different industries kind of teach about, treating people like VIP, guest service, and ultimately leadership. But if you wouldn't mind, your credentials are huge. I know you spent 10 years at the Ritz-Carlton. And you have quite the background, but it's always best for our speakers and our guests to kind of talk about their story in their own words. So if you wouldn't mind, give us the 3 to 4 minute, what we call origin story, where you grew up, kind of how you got in the hospitality business, and ultimately what you do today.
Absolutely, Kyle. So born and raised in the Caribbean, specifically on St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So I'm an island boy through and through. As a matter of fact, anything that's under 70 degrees is freezing for me. But I grew up, I started working in the hotel business, luxury hotels, when I was about 15 years old. Had several jobs, everything, actually close to 17 roles, some of which were part of a management and training program, about 9 of those. But I had everything from dishwasher to busboy to housekeeper, wine sommelier, bartender, bellman, doorman, towel, employee cafeteria, you name it. Eventually, I was a director of training and development, both at St. Thomas, Atlanta, Georgia, for the Ritz-Carlton properties there. And then eventually, my last role was Global Corporate Director of Training and Quality for the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company. So got to do a lot of cool things, support a lot of amazing hotels worldwide, opened some hotels as well. And over the last 16 years, I've had my own company. Matter of fact, this month made 16 years. So it's my sweet 16 anniversary of my business. And I was just doing some statistics, just looking at some numbers recently. In the last 16 years, I've been to 49 states, 21 countries, and 6 continents. So it's mind-blowing that time has flown by that quickly. But ultimately, Kyle, my real goal, my real mission in life is to just serve people, right? My company's purpose statement is, we exist to serve others so they may better serve the world. Ultimately, it's about just be kind to people, love people, help people, lift people, encourage people. That's really what I do.
I absolutely love that. And congrats on the anniversary. And that speaks to your success, being able to do this for 16 years. But Bryan, I want to go back. You got into the hospitality industry, I believe, as a busboy. Go back to that young kid. Kind of what was your interest? What was your mindset at the time? And did you have aspirations of, one day being a leader with such a great organization like the Ritz-Carlton, and then ultimately have your own business? Kind of talk to us, go back to that place and kind of talk to us about what your mindset was at that time.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, my first role when I was 15, and I had that was a busboy / dishwasher role. And the first maitre d' that I had on my first day of work, October 1992, he looked at me in the eyes. He didn't say hello or welcome or nice to see you. None of those nice orientation words that you would say at Yamava or something. His first words to me was, I want you to work in this restaurant like you own it. And the vein was popping out of his neck, and he was just really intense. He was telling me to own my job like I was the CEO of my role, like I was the chairman and executive of my job as a dishwasher. That revolutionized my thinking, right? Because that let me know that I wasn't just coming to work to do a job and go home, but I was meant to come to work and make the team better. The guest experience, the workplace experience, all boils down to how I do my job. So it really engendered a sense of ownership in what I do. And very shortly thereafter, my aspiration was to become a maitre d' like him, like my first manager. Then that changed into me wanting to be a general manager, and then that changed into me wanting to be in a corporate level. But then ultimately, as I started to grow, the entrepreneur in me started to kind of bubble up. I started to say, you know what? I will be happiest when I'm able to have no barriers whatsoever, and I can go and I can help people and help companies no matter what industry that they're in. Because even though I came from the hotel business, hotels, restaurants, spa business, most of my clients over the last 16 years have not been in hospitality. Many of them have been in everything from healthcare to airline to banks to government to schools, churches, universities. Of course, we have hotel clients still, but overall, my mission became I want to be able to help people with no restrictions, whether that's through writing books, of which we have 6 now, whether it's through producing conferences, we have 3 different ones we do every year, whether it's through keynotes or workshops or webinars or podcasts like this. That's what it's evolved to. And I think I'm just getting started. I'm sure that there's something more that has not been revealed to me as yet.
Bryan, you are a passionate individual, and I know we're going to hit on that later. Seeing you speak, the few times that we've spoken, it's genuine, right? But I want to go back to that comment you said of that manager, that supervisor who had the vein popping out, and kind of from the jump, basically gave you that accountability and said, you're the CEO of this role. What would your career have been like if you have, because that seems like it was a huge influence on you, right? That this notion that, wait, I should own my job, that accountability, right? That seems like it was a huge influence on you. If that conversation would not have happened, how would your role played out? Do you think naturally, just because of the way you're wired, you kind of would have been on the same path, or was that really a strong influence on you and ultimately how you shaped your career?
Kyle, it's hard to say because on one level, I've never wanted to be just like everyone else. So if everybody else is kind of huddling around at school or even at work and they're just maybe gossiping or not putting forth their whole heart, their whole self, I naturally want to stand apart and do something that's more significant, right? That's just how I've always been wired. I think I may have gone farther, but that comment on that day by that person was designed for me. I can tell from a divine perspective that comment was designed, and it literally awakened something that it's what you know what it did, Kyle? It amplified something that was already there. And I think as leaders, particularly in hospitality business, part of our jobs is to amplify the goodness and the potential that's in each person we're fortunate to lead. I think that's a key point. We had to be amplifiers.
I love that. We have to be amplifiers. You've made a career in hospitality, and I know that your principles and what you talk about applies beyond just hospitality. But if you wouldn't mind, we've looked at the latest jobs reports. We're doing so much better. We're at a better place than we were. But if you still look at the hospitality and entertainment sector as a whole, we're still not where we were pre-pandemic. So I'm curious to know from your perspective, make the case as to why a career in hospitality is appealing in 2022.
Yes. Well, as you've already mentioned, the hospitality and tourism industry is coming back extremely strong. I mean, just look at the hotel openings and the pipeline of hotels that are opening. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in Tampa helping to open a brand new luxury hotel, right? So this is happening on a major level. Guests are coming out more than ever before. So many of our hospitality clients, whether it's hotels, restaurants, spas, they're reporting like record revenues, record profitability in their existence over decades and decades of being in operation. So that's one level. I think another level is that now more than ever, kindness is at a premium. I think if you are genuinely kind, if you genuinely love people, if you genuinely want to lighten someone else's load, you will automatically stand out. And the hospitality business is really built for people like that to work in. Yeah. So if you're that kind of person, there's a plethora of roles, no matter what your strengths are. If you like numbers, it's accounting and so on. If you like sales, there's the sales department. If you like to teach and educate, there's training. If you're into food and beverage and wines, it's F&B. So hospitality is one of those industries that no matter what you're into, even it's funny to say, but even if you don't really like people that much, Even if you don't like being face to face with people, it's a role for you still. I don't care what it is. So that's what I would say. I think hospitality is one of the best industries you can ever be in.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I've talked about this with prior guests. Even if you're introverted, I understand that it might not be in your wheelhouse to chat people up. But to your point, there's just so many different roles you can find a place. And I think we're all in the business of, I come from a communication and advertising background, what we like to call breaking the clutter. Like that's ultimately what we want to do. We want to impact people's lives. We want to give them a great experience. We want to break the mundane. So on that note, though, because I completely agree with you as far as there's so many opportunities to kind of own your position. Can five-star service or the things that we're talking about, right? Can that be taught? Is that naturally born within you? I think you were talking about, if I heard you correctly, you kind of had an inner spark that was brought out of you. It was probably already there. But can these things be taught, or is there some degree of it that's kind of come within? Kind of what's your take on that?
I would say both. I think it can be taught, but ideally it's something that's already inside of you. And I like to give this analogy. This is one of the analogies. I could learn how to climb a mountain. There could be a beautiful mountain. I could learn how to climb it. I could take classes on how to climb a mountain. I can read books, listen to podcasts, go to conferences, be mentored one-on-one on how to climb a mountain. So I can climb the mountain, but that doesn't mean that I should climb the mountain. That doesn't mean that it's something that I should do. It may not be something I'm interested in at all, right? So I think anyone can learn to do pretty much anything, including lead, including serve people. Yeah. But I think the question should go away from can it be done or to the two, should I do it? Is this something that I am wired to do? Because if I naturally love to serve people and make people feel amazing and make people feel exceptional, then if I add in knowledge and skills and experiences, now you are now supplementing what's already there. Now you're taking a talent and you're turning it into a strength. I think that's where people ought to reside. They should reside in the place where they naturally love, and then you supplement that. And that's the case for serving. And Kyle, it's also the case for leading. You and I probably know. I know a lot of people who are in a leadership role who genuinely do not like to lead people. But they can't say it out loud. They can't say it at work, right? It'll mess up their career. They can only mention it maybe to their significant other during pillow talk or something. But see, so I can learn how to lead people, but still not like it. And if you don't like something, you'll never do more than what's expected. And to get to that excellent level, to get to that world-class level in anything, it always requires you to do more than what's expected.
I love that. And you kind of hit on that, Bryan, but I want to phrase it like this, trying to give advice to those watching. Let's just throw a sample out there. Let's just say there's a manager out there who now wants to be a director, or maybe it's a director who now wants to be a vice president. That kind of test of should I do it versus can I do it? Kind of what are the type of things, as someone weighs that, right? Because I think everyone's kind of trying to determine that self-awareness and kind of where I'm at today, and do I really want that next level, and do I really want to progress my career? Any practical guidance you can provide that from, because that's such a strong question of should I do it or can I do it? Any practical examples there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one good criteria would be to look back over your life and see if there's been any evidence of you wanting to do it. Whatever it is that you're meant to do in this world, you've already been doing your whole life. So I'll say that again. Whatever it is you're meant to do in this world, whether it's serving people, leading people, you've already been doing your whole life. Because it's a natural part of who you are. If it's a natural part of who you are, there has been evidence, or at the very least, there's been yearning. You've had an aspiration for it. It's not something that you have to discover like, oh, I never thought about that before. It's been there. It's just a matter of it being uncovered. And honestly, and here's the thing that's for us humans, many of us tend to not truly value or appreciate what we're really good at. It typically requires somebody else to point it out. Because if you're naturally good at something, many times we just kind of undervalue it, like, oh, doesn't everybody like that? Oh, no. Yeah? I think that's key.
100%. You have already been doing it in evidence. I want to touch on that in a minute. That was something practical that stuck with me when you discussed it with the Yamava leadership group. Kind of last point on this topic is, people are thinking about hospitalities or progressing their career. There's been this new kind of popular term going around, quiet quitting, which essentially, if I understand correctly, I don't want to say it wrong, but from what I've read, the little research that I've done, essentially what it is this movement of people that's popular on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, the likes, of kind of just the anti-hustle culture, the anti-go above and beyond, pretty much just do your job as you're told, right? Make sure that you're hitting everything you're asked for, but don't do anything more. So you are doing your job, right? Everything that you're supposed to be doing, but don't kind of go beyond that, right? So I'm just curious to know, what's your kind of take on that? Maybe that's always been going on, right? It's just now we have these social platforms to kind of spread that, but just curious to know your take on the subject.
You hit it right on. You hit it right on the nose. It's always been happening. Matter of fact, a lot of times when I do leadership sessions, I oftentimes make a comment that it's bad when people quit and leave, but it's worse when they quit and stay. So quiet quitting in many ways is people quitting and staying, or they're in the job and they're fully aware that they're not putting forth their best effort. Now, I believe that is extremely dangerous. You know why? Because anything you do repeatedly will eventually become a habit. Matter of fact, after 21 days, if you do anything for at least 21 days, it's going to become very, very difficult to not do it, including giving half your best. If I continuously give half my best, eventually giving half my best will become a habit. You can make all the arguments, well, I come to work, I clock in, and I clock out, and I go home. Well, no, then that's going to follow you into your rest of your life, doing half your best, because it's not a turn on, turn off thing. So my advice is that you are a brand. Look at yourself as a brand. Like, you are Kyle LLC Incorporated Inc. That's who you are. Therefore, you should never, ever deliberately give less than what you know you can do. Because by doing so, you will create a habit and your brand will suffer for it. And that brand follows you. Your brand is your reputation. Don't let anyone, anything, any workplace cause you or influence you to give less than what you're made to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And something you're kind of saying too is I think we talk about passion. Another way to think about it is energy. If you're think about how much time we spend in our careers and our jobs or our workplace, whatever that may be. A lot of times it's more than our family. Why would you want to be somewhere where you kind of have to think about like, okay, I'm only going to go to X amount, right? Like, take any example that you can think of. Like, I loved basketball growing up, played it all the time, right? When I played, I went all out because I loved it. I was passionate. Now, some days I didn't have it, right? Some days I was off, some days I was but for the most part, it gave me energy. And I feel like as we think about our careers and where we're putting our time and energy, if you don't naturally, kind of to what your point about you have already been doing it, then it's probably time to switch careers anyways. And I understand for those who might have a side hustle, or maybe it's just fueling that energy, totally get that. But net, you should really be thinking about where you're putting your time. And if it's not getting you energy, that could be a problem, don't you think?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, one of the indicators of talent, one of them is, are you energized when you do it? That's one of the indicators of talent. So you'll know if something is a talent if when you're doing it, you are not drained, but you're energized by it. Okay. Another indicator, just so you know, I mentioned it already, is yearning. You have a natural yearning for wanting to do it. Another indicator of talent is rapid learning, meaning you learn how to do that thing faster than everybody else. You're like skipping steps already when everybody's just trying to learn, right? And another indicator of talent is you are really good at it. So these are from the field of positive psychology, right? And these are what we call indicators of talent. Those are some of the things you can be mindful of as you're assessing yourself. Just kind of taking note as to what gives me energy, right? What do I love to do? What have I always had a yearning for? right? What have I learned quicker than I just do this thing really, really well. These are all indicators.
Absolutely. You know, Bryan, so many nuggets. I want to stay on that topic a little bit, helping people who might be supervisors or managers. They're hiring folks, they're hiring people. Kind of talk about the things that have helped you or serve you along the way when you're trying to, you know, build your team or hire. Any practices or any things that you look for or practical tips you can provide on that end?
Yes. For me, particularly when it comes to hiring people, I'm always looking at, is the individual showing eagerness? Do they look like they want to be here? Not they want to have a job. You can't blame somebody for wanting to have a job. But do you want to work here on my team? If so, why? Convince me that you want to work here on my team in this company, which requires you to do some research, right? If you really want to work here, then you've done some research. That's one for me. Another thing for me is specificity. If let's say in my company, one of our values has to do with anticipating people's needs, then I may ask you, please illustrate what it means to anticipate needs. You should be able to give me a concrete, specific example that happened recently. Because if it's a consistent, recurring pattern in your life, then you do it all the time. If you start giving me hypotheticals and, well, if, that tells me very clearly that it's not a normal, recurring pattern in your life. So that's another thing that I look for. I look for specificity. I look for eagerness. I also look for how do you view people? Like, how do you treat people when you don't know anything about them, right? The receptionist, right? The person you call in on the phone, just walking on the street. How do you treat people who you don't know? Because it's easy to be nice to me. You know who I am, right? You know who I am. You know what my credentials, my background. That doesn't count. Anybody can be nice to somebody who they like, who they think is important. What I want to know is, do you view strangers, people who you've never met before, do you view them as valuable and worthy? Because that's who you're going to be serving in the hospitality business, people who you don't know.
So how do you do that then? Because that's great advice. I love that, because I totally agree. But if someone's sitting in front of you, I'm thinking about hiring this person. How can I cue in? Because you're right, they're probably going to turn it on. They could be nice to me, but how can I kind of pull out that example? I love the evidence KPI. I think we'll touch on that a little more, but that example of how do you treat strangers, or how do you just talk to the person outside? Kind of any practical tips to kind of mine that out in the interview process?
Absolutely. I think if it's a face-to-face, just observation, right? Observation, not just of yourself, but if you're coming into an interview with me, I'm going to have my team. I'm going to have colleagues who are going to be looking out for, who are looking at you and looking out for you. And I actually do that all the time when I work in hotels. I would have people just observing them, observing how they treat people. Are they just sitting down, not interacting with anybody? Do they look aloof? Do they look like they're engaged? Do they look friendly? So those are some of the, I may not see it, but others may. Others most likely will. Because you can't hide your true self, but for so long.
Absolutely. I love it. So we're talking a little bit about hiring. Now let's go to the other end. And this is somewhere that, I highly recommend Dr. Bryan Williams and K Williams and all of everything that you do. So much so that we're going to do some managers training with you, which we're really excited about. But as we think about the other end, retention and leaders leading people and getting people motivated and, kind of having a cause and things of that nature, you speak a lot about spending time with your top performers, which I think human nature is kind of counterintuitive. I think you're right, but I think kind of we naturally want to spend time with the mid-level performers, maybe the low performers, right? Because we might think that the higher performers got it. They're a high performer because they don't need me to coach them, mentor them. I don't need to spend time with them. But a light bulb moment for some of us was like, oh, I don't know if I'm actually doing that. So if you kind of would speak to that, because I think that's a powerful principle that probably not a lot of the majority of leaders are actually doing, which is spending more time with their top talent.
Yes. Whatever you focus on improves. That's called the law of focus. Whatever you focus on improves, including your best people. So if the goal is to have a team of amazing people, my advice is to start and end your day. Spend a little bit more time with your current amazing people. Number one, they probably need that time more, even though they may not tell you. Everyone who works hard needs to know that their hard work is appreciated. Kyle, no matter what country I've traveled to, no matter what industry I've worked with, one thing has been very constant, and is that the hardest working people tend to feel the least appreciated because their leaders kind of say, well, you've got it. I mean, you've always been engaged, so I don't have to look at you anymore. It's a problem because people like to know that their hard work is appreciated. Not only that, but your top people will now help you create a culture that will kind of pull the mid-tier and the bottom tier performers up. And if it's done really well, if you really build a culture and you engage your top people and helping you build a culture as a leader, then you will create a culture where people who are not bought in will want to leave, which is excellent. Because you should, and I think that's a big misnomer, especially in hotels and hospitality, casinos and restaurants and whatever. You should not try to retain everyone. I'll say it again. You should not try to retain everyone. You should only try to retain those people you want your guests to remember. That's not everyone. Do everything you can to start and end your day with the people you want to clone.
I love that. And on that note, Bryan, because I think that's the hardest part of any aspiring leader is, it's great when you have top performers and it's great when you have a good culture, but no matter what you do, eventually, if you're going to lead people, you're going to meet people who might just be a different phase in life. They might just interests might not align. They might not align with the goals of your organization. And you have those people, so how do you go about those conversations, right? That candor. Because I think that's a hard part of leadership is, I think it's what you talk about, and I don't want to take your words, but what you demonstrate, celebrate, tolerate. And when you have those people kind of stay within your organization, there's a ripple effect to that. But talk to me your evolution as it relates to kind of dealing with the people who are kind of bottom performers. How do you approach those conversations? How do you switch the culture with some of those people who just for whatever reason are not aligned with the expectations of your team?
Yes. Well, the first thing, there's a proverb that's attributed to the Navajo tribe. And the proverb is, you cannot wake someone who pretends to be asleep. Okay? So basically, you can't make someone care, especially a full-grown adult. You can't make people care. So in my case, and I've had a lot of teams that I've led and so on, and you're so correct. Sometimes you have people who they don't want to be all the engaged and all that. Some people just slip through. You may have inherited a team, right, where you have people there who just kind of were allowed to be suboptimal. So what did I do in those situations? Number one, I'll make sure that my vision and expectations are very, very clear. That's number one. Right? That's very important. And after I demonstrate, after I model the type of energy and passion and service I want to see, and then I started recognizing the behaviors, like I started to celebrate those behaviors through recognition and so on, then move to the tolerating part. I can't tolerate anything other than that. And this is where I would do one-on-ones. I would literally have a one-on-one and talk to you about, hey, this is the standard. I noticed that you're not in alignment with that standard. Let's talk about why. Is this the right role for you? Right? Do you want to be here? Yes or no? Let's talk about that. What are your goals in life? Right? And your goal may have nothing to do with hospitality. But let's say you're working in a casino, but your real goal is to be a nurse or a physician or an accountant or something like that. Excellent. Now, my next question as a leader is, how can I help you do that? Because, right, I shouldn't just, as a leader, I cannot only be vested in your goals and your story when it suits me. It has to suit you. People buy into the leader before they buy into the leadership. So even though you may only be with me now for another 5-6 months, I know for that 5-6 months you will do everything you can to not let me down, because I'm giving you my best, right? Whether it's 5 months, 6 months, 5 years, it doesn't matter. All I know, because tomorrow isn't promised, Kyle. I want to know today, how can I help you be the best you can be? That's my responsibility to you as a leader. Now, your responsibility to me and to the organization and to our guests is to give your best self. But the standard is we give our best self. I give you my best as a leader. You give me your best as a team member. We give each other our best, and everything else will take care of itself.
Bryan, you're dropping just so many wisdom bombs here today. I can't even keep up. I'm writing so many notes. But two things I really took from that is keeping your communication simple. I'll give you an example. So I know our mission, vision, and value statements, but something we have here at Yamava, when people ask, because it's a common question, we're talking about interviews, what's the culture like? And I go to the slogan that we have. It's on our doors. It's in our heart of house. It's on our LinkedIn, which is build something greater together. That's what it is at the end of the day. That's what we're about. It's about building something that could be the physical building. It could be the expansion project. It could be us trying to be a 5-star property. We're always trying to progress. There's always something, and it's always done together. There's no individual who's responsible for this. We all have to be part of it. It's for the tribe. And when the tribe has such a community focus, such an education focus, that it's really impacting not just us, not just the team, but the whole community. So I love that. And I think about, you're the living proof of that. Within what you talked about earlier, I actually bolded it. Passion is to serve others so that they may better serve the world. You keep it simple. And I think as leaders, that's something that you could take is, I think so often we think about our mission, vision, values. We think about our PDFs. We think about all the different language we have out there, but do the team members know it in a way that's practical, that they can apply it? And I love that you hit on that. And then the other thing too is empathy. You put the person first. So if you do have a performer who's slacking for whatever reason, you start with them, like, what's going on? But you're really doing it from an angle that you want them to be happy. Like, you want to make sure, like, maybe this isn't a good fit for them anymore. But your genuine interest is with the person and caring, versus human nature might be like, well, how could they do this? Do they know that everybody else works this hard, and yada, yada, yada. And I love that you hit on that. It's actually caring about the individual.
Yeah, Kyle, because I would be disingenuous. Let's say that you are on my team. I'm your leader, right? I would be disingenuous if I'm asking you to care for the guests, but you don't feel cared for by me. It'll be very disingenuous. And that happens all the time. As your leader, I cannot ask you to do anything that I'm not doing for you first. Oftentimes, particularly in the hospitality business, oftentimes we ask our staff to give a caliber of service that they've never received. They've never been a recipient of the caliber of service that we are asking them to give. The best way as a leader for me to teach you how to serve and care for is to serve and care for you.
And it's coming full circle too about what you spoke about earlier, as far as like this notion that you can turn it on and turn it off. If you want to have excellent service, and I'm discovering this myself as we try to become a 5-star property, and we have great service standards, but you're right, you almost have to live it 24/7. You can't just turn it on, turn it off. So now I'll catch myself not saying things like good morning, good afternoon, right? Some of those standards that we talk about, but you're right. You can't just, you got to live it. And I think that's something that you talk about as well. On that subject, I'm just curious to know, I mean, we've touched on a few here today, but life lessons in hospitality, any additional ones that you learned through, just once again, trying to give advice to those aspiring in the hospitality and casino industry, any life lessons in hospitality that still serve you today that we haven't mentioned?
Yeah, two stand out for me, Kyle. I think one is assume that everyone is a VIP. Assume so. It's easy to the CEO or the royalty or this person or the celebrity coming in, but assume that person you've never met, and they're coming in with their family of 4 or family of 5 or something, and they've been saving all year for that one weekend at Yamava. Assume they're a VIP. Treat everybody like they're amazing. I think that's number one, and that's really served me well in life. That's number one. Number two is, and I've touched on it already, but this is another really big lesson that shaped me. It still shapes me, and I hope it'll shape my children. Is be the CEO of your job, be of your role, whatever it is. Be the CEO. Own that thing. Like, do it like it's yours. Do it like you're the owner of it, because ultimately you are. You're the owner of your brand.
I think you kind of touched on it and you hit on it, but I want to ask the question anyway, just to make sure I'm not missing anything. But playing devil's advocate to those out there who might say, well, my manager has a higher salary than me, or the CEO is the CEO. I make bare minimum compared to them. Why should I have to work harder? Right. I think you kind of touched on it, but to those kind of people that have that mindset, what would you say?
If you look like a duck, quack like a duck, walk like a duck, you must be a duck. That means if let's say your aspiration is to have a job where you're getting paid $170,000 a year working in the hospitality business, but right now you're making minimum wage. Right now you have to act like right now like you are making $250,000. Like you're making that salary that you're aspiring for. Think that way, talk that way, act that way, take initiative that way. Don't perform at the level you're currently in. Think about where you want to be. Think about the type of job you want to be, the level in the organization you want to be. Operate at that level. Then you become noticed for being on that level. Then that level starts to attract you. Then you don't even have to go chasing it. You'll start seeing opportunities. That's what happened with me. You start seeing opportunities dropping and doors opening. People saying, you know, that Bryan guy or that Kyle guy, he's always talked about this or that. He looks sharp. He might be a busboy now, but I can see a restaurant manager in the future. He might be a front desk manager now. I can see a room director in the future, right? They see that. People see the opportunity by how you perform right now in the role. If you are faithful in little things, you'll be faithful in big ones.
As Bryan, as somebody who has worked, I think you said 17 different roles, you've 16 years now, it's your own business, very successful, helped, you've kind of manifested what you're kind of speaking the truth, right? You've kind of manifested, you've worked hard, it's all kind of happened for you. So usually I save this question more towards the end, but I want to ask it now because it's fitting. Going back, is there any advice, because you've kind of done it in a lot of ways, the things that you aspired to be, and to your point, you're just getting started. I know your energy is still high. You have big things on the horizon, but any advice that you would give to your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Yes. When I first started working in hospitality, I viewed the business in a siloed terms. Like whatever department you're in, that's my department. That's my silo. And the restaurant or the casino or the spa or the hotel, like that's my silo. So I've learned, what I had to learn over time is that you may work in a department, but the guest doesn't care about your department. The guest cares about the experience. So you have to view it not from your perspective of where I work, but from the guest experience of what do they need? What do they want? Why did they come here? And how can I use my role as part of this puzzle to create a great experience? So looking at it more from looking at the operation from a universal perspective versus this is my job in this department perspective.
That's powerful. And I think that's particularly insightful and huge for those working in our industry, casino hospitality, because you're right. It's such an expansive industry. There's multiple departments. So if you can have that framework early on, that's key coming from you. Bryan, I want to jump to a segment we call the bigger picture. So I'll show a picture and we kind of just riff on what's going on here. And for those listening via podcast, I'll kind of explain the picture. But one thing, Bryan, about you is you are a phenomenal speaker. I don't think I need to convince anybody. People just listening to you today, you're passionate. You're a master at really captivating an audience. Like for those who can't see this picture, it's a packed house. Everyone is staring, smiling, looking at Bryan. You could tell that they are just fully engaged with his message at this moment. And I've experienced it. So Bryan, once again, trying to give advice to those, because I think being able to communicate in a way that not only you're just talking, but people actively want to listen. You're a master at that. Kind of talk through the evolution of that, and how did you kind of own this skill to the point of where you're at today?
Kyle, I'll tell you something. It still boggles my mind that anyone cares about anything I have to say. And I'm serious. When people sit down and they're listening to me or they're taking notes, I'm like, it's just me talking. But I think the evolution. So as a professional speaker, right? I've been doing this since now 2001 as a professional speaker. So this is 21 years. Is that correct math? Kind of 21 years? About 21 years. About 21 years. And when I first started, I was much more concerned with what I wanted to say, with getting the message across, making sure I had the right stories, the right mannerisms and all that. And very quickly, it evolved into, it's not about me at all. It's about the other person. It's about those people in the audience. My goal, the reason, I guess part of the reason everybody's looking at me is because I think they can all tell in that room, that was in Rapid City, South Dakota, that picture, and there was about 1,700 people. That room, each person, they could feel that I genuinely cared about them. And they could tell that I really wanted them to get the message. And not just get the message, but get the message. That's what I'm really after. I'm really after, like, you not just intellectually grasping it, but I want you to emotionally and even spiritually feel it. Because when you feel it on a deeper level, on a visceral level, then you feel compelled to do something about it. And that's the real purpose of training or speaking or education, is that when you leave that room where you feel this euphoria and you're motivated and you're inspired, when you leave the room, that's where the real evidence of, was it effective? Because now you're going to want to do something about it. You're going to want to make a major transformational change in your life that will be sustainable, that will benefit not only yourself, but those around you, both in your personal and professional life.
Bryan, I think I know the answer to this, but how does one get to this level, though? Because you're 100% right. I think if I'm hearing you correctly, it's about getting out of your own head and really putting value to the audience. And you absolutely do that. You're doing it in our conversation right now, right? But how does one get to that level? How can one practice? Because there's so many people out there who have a public fear, and it's out of a good place, right? They're afraid that they're going to mess up or they're going to be stuttering. You kind of spoke to that. But is there anything that people can do to start practicing now? To your point earlier, if this is where I want to be, kind of if it acts like a duck, it looks like a duck. What are some practical things someone could be doing right now to kind of be a better public speaker?
I think number one is, don't try to talk to a group ever. Always, like all the people in that room right there, I'm not trying to talk to everybody. I'm trying to speak to each person. So I'm literally looking at each person. I'm trying my best to make eye contact with as many individuals as possible. So as I'm saying a message, as I'm making a point, as I'm saying a story, if I'm sharing a joke, I'm literally talking to individuals all the time. And I mean, like, you've seen that in person, right? I would even use names if I know your names. So I think that's number one. You're not talking to a group, you're talking to individuals. And then number two, and it's something that I do, if I'm speaking to a group of 5 people, or even you, like this is just one-on-one, I did the same thing, one-on-one, or thousands of people. What I do before I get on is I literally pray, and I ask to be reduced, right? So that way I don't get in the way, and that the message comes forth in a very clear, impactful manner. So I try to minimize myself and maximize the message. To minimize myself, which is my ego and all that, to maximize the message, so that whomever needs to receive something from the message will receive it. I know full and well that in that room, that picture you're showing there, 1,700 people, everybody didn't get the same message. I talked about a lot of things, and that's probably on a 60-minute keynote. Each person got something. But what I really hope for, though, what I'm really praying for, though, Kyle, I would love it if just one person got something that really, really transformed their life, like transformed their marriage, transformed their parental status, transformed their role as a leader, transformed their role as a neighbor. I want one person at minimum to get that. And I don't know who it is because it's none of my business. but that's what I'm thinking of. And I think I mentioned this to you one-on-one, but I grew up as a very severe stutterer. I literally had a neurological disorder where I couldn't speak very well. Like I would be teased and bullied like every day in school. Like people were really mean to me growing up. Now I've always been friendly, I've always been extroverted, but could you imagine being an extrovert and being afraid to talk? It's like being trapped inside of yourself. That was me until about the 11th grade when I started working in hotels. The hospitality business saved me because when I started working in hotels, I literally forgot to stutter because I fell so deeply in love with what I was doing, right? And I mentioned to you the point about yearning earlier. When I first started to be a trainer and speaker, it felt as though I'd been doing it my whole life. And I was, in this sense. Aristotle said that everything is created twice, first in your mind, then in reality. Well, through my childhood, through my elementary school years, middle school years, half of my high school years, my favorite game to play, my favorite daydream to have, my favorite fantasy to have was speaking, because it was a superpower. It's something I couldn't do. The same way a child would dream about being the Incredible Hulk or Superman or Spider-Man or something. That for me was a superpower because I couldn't do it, right? So I would imagine myself doing it, never, ever, ever, ever thinking I would actually do it because that's something I literally couldn't do. So when I started, so I would be practicing. So when I started actually speaking, I had actually been doing it my whole life. So the point, Kyle, is a lot of times the things we think are a curse in our life is actually a training camp, setting us up and preparing us for whatever it is we're meant to do in this world, including speaking or educating. And just so you know, my last point on this, because I can go all day with this topic, is in my mind, I'm not really speaking to anybody. I'm actually serving. I view everything through the lens of serving. I'm a server. By trade, I'm a fine dining server, right? So when I'm speaking or I'm doing this webinar right now with you, or you're consulting or whatever I'm doing, I'm like, how can I serve you? The same way I serve you in a 5-star restaurant or a 5-star hotel. It's the same idea for me.
Absolutely. And you are that person, Bryan. I think everyone could see that or hear that today if they're listening via podcast. I wrote down so many notes there. What you're speaking of is something we talk about here, which is one person at a time. So even as you're trying to master your communication skills, you're doing it out of the same place, right? Which is serving others. But that skill is kind of built one person at a time. And same thing with guest service. You get overwhelmed when you think about, oh my gosh, how many visitors we have today on my shift, but just you take it one person at a time and just focus on that person in front of you. That's where the magic happens. And you've hit on that so many times. And something, Bryan, that I've observed with you that I'm trying to get better at, because I'm like, man, he's good, is you set the tone. You set the tone from the beginning. There's no Dr. Bryan Williams kind of, when you speak, it's like you're Kyle, Peter, Serena, like you do. I imagine this is intentional, but you kind of set the tone of this is not going to be something where you're going to kind of just glaze over. Like if you do, then because this is not the kind of workshop or speech for you. You're going to participate here, and it's funny because it's almost like all the stories that you've been telling. It was that first supervisor you have, as far as like you're the CEO. So there's kind of first impressions, I think, go a long way, and you try your best to kind of make a great first impression. Do I have that right?
You absolutely do. And the first impression happens long before I get on stage or I actually begin the training. Like when I saw you in maybe 2 months ago, when I saw you and your leadership, from the moment I came in the room, right during the break, I was introducing myself. I was knowing who you are. I was shaking hands. That's where the presentation really starts, right? Because what I'm trying to do is build relationships. I'm trying to build connection. So it makes it far more likely that you'll be interested in receiving what I have. I mean, yes, before you met me, you had a bio. You probably saw videos of me somewhere. You probably saw articles or maybe even books. You probably got all that, but that's not a replacement for me and that human to human connection. So that, yes, the first impression is key, both before you start and once you start.
Yeah, and man, Bryan, once again, just thank you. Just a couple final questions here. You've given so much great advice. I highly encourage people to check out everything Bryan has to offer. Look at him to speak with your group of leadership, drbryankWilliams.com. I believe I have that right, but Bryan, we'll plug at the end here. But a couple final questions. So a successful person like yourself, I heard, I'm paraphrasing here, but Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson had this short video and it really pulled at me. And he basically said, he was admitting that he doesn't sleep enough. He only sleeps about 4 hours a day. And he's like, that should not be applauded. But he goes, the one thing that I do that works for me, and he encourages others, is he goes, I protect the things that allow me to do what I do. So for him, that's his family, his time with his family, that's his time in his pickup truck, and his time in the gym. Those are his three spaces that he does everything he can to protect, to allow him to do what he does. So I'm curious to know, from your perspective, Dr. Bryan K. Williams, what are the things that you protect, or the things outside of everything we've talked about that allow you to do what you do?
Absolutely. Number one, first and foremost for me, is I protect my quiet time with God. That's something that's a non-negotiable. I have to spend minimum 10 to 15 minutes a day, every day, where I'm just my quiet time, where I talk to God and I allow God to talk to me. And I'm still, and I read. So that's critical. That's where it all starts and ends for me. And then time with my wife, who we're married now for 21 years. So time with her, like one-on-one time with her, to the point where, at least once a month we go on a date somewhere, where at least that's very, very important. And then time with my children. We have 2 children. So those 3 things, God, my wife, my children, those 3 things are very non-negotiable. I'm very stingy with my time when it comes to that. I don't like things to get in the way of any of those 3 things ever. Because when so those are my 3 biggest things that I protect.
I love that. On that note, is there a hobby, or is there something that you do, or maybe is there something that people would be surprised to learn about you, as far as it could be a book, it could be a movie, it could be an activity you do, it could be something maybe a little nerdy, but anything that Bryan does on that front that maybe a lot of people might not know about?
Well, my biggest hobby is I love to read. I'm an avid reader. I always read like 2-3 books at once, usually. Avid reader. I love traveling with my family, to the point that's part of the reason we chose to homeschool years ago. This is like our 8th year homeschooling, because we didn't want any restrictions on our children coming with us. So at least once a month we try to go on a trip. So traveling with family is a huge deal for me. But one thing that I love to do whenever I'm traveling, it has to happen at least once each leg on a trip. I do a Sudoku puzzle. That's my jam, Kyle. Oh my gosh. I actually can feel my brain I feel smarter. I do it. Yeah, I love doing Sudoku puzzles, and I like doing them in pen. So that way it forces me to not make a mistake. So I really like doing Sudoku puzzles when I'm flying. That's a big hobby of mine. I've been doing that for a number of years now.
And I love that you phrased it that way. That's my jam. I think that's how I'm going to rephrase the question. What's your jam? For you, it's a Sudoku puzzle. That's what keeps you sharp. And I think after people watching you today, they're going to be doing Sudoku puzzles as well. Something that this is my last question. Bryan, I can go on and on and on, but I got to be sensitive to your time here. We're 2 minutes over. Once again, just thank you again for taking time here today. Before I ask the final question, though, I want to give a minute for you to plug. If I know people are going to be interested in your work and hearing more of you, where should they go if they want to keep up with you and hear about everything you got going on?
Absolutely. So my main website, or the mothership, right, would be drbwilliams.com. That's D-R-B as in boy, Williams.com. That's where you can get all the information, books, workshops, events, blogs, everything. And this fall, we're actually taking one of our most popular live events back on the road. And it's called the Manager Skills Workshop. It's a 2-day program where the focus is on providing the foundational elements on how to manage others. So delegation, how to handle conflict, how to effectively communicate, how to apply the right leadership style to the right situation. So that program is happening in the DC area, October 5th and 6th. October 6th and 7th in Plano, Texas, in October 26th and 27th. That one's sold out. And then there's one, the last one is in Las Vegas, Nevada, and Caesar's Palace, November 7th and 8th. And the website for that is bwmanagerskills.com.
Awesome. I know people will be checking you out. I'm sure your calendar is already full, but it fills up more and more and more once they kind of hear what you speak to. And it's just intoxicating and it's contagious. So once again, Bryan, thank you. Here's my final question we ask everybody. We're all about taking people's careers to the next level. So if you can only provide 3 tips to somebody who wants to take their career to the next level, what would those 3 tips be?
Absolutely. Number 1, competence. Know your job, know your role, know the technical aspects of it, know everything about what you're doing. I don't care if you're mowing the lawn, I don't care if you're washing the windows, I don't care if you're serving wine, if you're dealing at the blackjack table. Know the ins and outs. That's number 1, is competency. Don't skirt over that. Number 2, take initiative. Do more than if somebody asks you to do A and B, do A, B, C, and suggest D. Chances are whenever your manager asks you to do something, you already knew it needed to be done. So don't wait. CEOs don't wait for other people to tell them what to do. You look and you seek what needs to be done and you suggest it to be done and you do it before you're asked. So competency, take initiative. And number 3 is build relationships. I don't care how smart you are, how talented you are, how good looking you are, how much initiative you take. If people don't know what your goals are, they can't help you get them, right? So build relationships, and it's from the perspective of not like, what can you do for me, but it's, what can I do for you? Like, how can I help you? How can I add value to your life? If I report to you, Kyle, I want to know what your goals are. I want to know what's on your strategic plan, so I can see how I can best assist you with that. And what that does, number 1, I'm adding value, which is a beautiful thing right there. But organically, you will then want to reciprocate and find out what my goals are. Yeah, so be competent, take initiative, and build relationships. Those are the 3 you can't ever discount. And then if you do those 3, if you do one of those 3, you get ahead. If you do all of those 3, you're unstoppable. I'm a living testimony to those 3.
And that is how it's done, ladies and gentlemen. Bryan, once again, thank you. For those listening, please, if you like this content, review, leave us a comment. But once again, Bryan, I know I wrote down so many notes. I'm sure our listeners did. Once again, thank you for taking the time, and be well, my friend.
Check out more episodes on nextlevelcasinocareers.com.